Okay, good morning. Welcome to the La Plata Electric Association monthly board meeting. Go ahead and start the meeting as we always do with a Pledge of Allegiance. If you don't mind standing where you are, please. I pledge allegiance
to
the flag of the United States
of America,
to the republic
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, welcome. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'll need a motion to approve the agenda, but I think we're going to have a request to modify the agenda. Tim Wheeler.
So I would like to make a motion to approve the agenda with one change, add an update on community broadband partnership to the executive session.
Second.
Thank you so much, Ted. All in favor? Hand up, say aye. All approved. All opposed. All abstained. Okay, the motion passes. The agenda is approved. Let's go ahead and open the floor for member comments. Graham, give us the preview.
Thank you. The board encourages comments about the cooperative from its members. The board asks that each participant's comment pertain to cooperative business. Those wanting to address the board during public comment period are granted 5 minutes to address their topics. Lengthy comments to the board shall be submitted in writing. Formal complaints must be filed in compliance with board policy. Comments from the public will be directed to the entire board and not to any individual. No personal attacks shall be allowed. Failure to follow these requirements may cause the public comment period to be terminated. Copies of our policies are available on our website.
Great, thank you. Okay, comments? Okay, let's push on. We go ahead and we have a set of consent board items today. Would anybody like any of these pulled out for individual discussion? Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to request the director expense approval be pulled.
Okay, we will do that. Any others?
So, Kohler, I would like to move to approve it with that change. I do have some questions on the monthly write-off, but I don't have an issue with the actual document, so I don't really want to pull it. But if I could ask a couple of questions, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, I think you can if we get a second. The usual sequence of let's get the motion.
I'll second that.
We'll take Rachel. Great. So we're going to open the floor for discussion on the motion. Kohler, go ahead. What is your comment or question?
So I know that we suspended the disconnect during the pandemic. I was wondering if it was reinstated. And then also when I look at the monthly write-offs, I see some of them even as low as $10, and there's quite a few of them under $100. And I have a question that, is that amount that's shown there, is that the full amount that that account owes? Or is that only the amount that has hit that stage of collection? I was wondering about that. And then in addition to that, there's so many that are below $100. I wonder if there was a feel from staff of if they have an idea why that is. Is it somebody just skipping town, doesn't want to pay, or do we really have members that can't pay $10? So those are the questions I have.
John, do you want Carl? Carl's ready to answer this.
Go ahead, Carl.
Okay.
Yes. So at that stage, Kohler, yes, up to your first question, yes, we are once again disconnecting. That has been happening for some time. When they have gotten to this stage, they are no longer receiving service. So where you have a small amount, sometimes those are some late fees and so forth, but they are no longer a member. So why we are down, well, they are no longer an active member. Why they are down to, you know, this small amount is just a process of they've paid some, they haven't paid others. and this is the very final stage of the process. So we're just like, well, we're just not getting this. We will go to their patronage capital, discount it, get what we can, and then the remainder will go to collections.
Perfect. That answers all my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments from the consent board items? Okay, all in favor, hold your hand up, say aye. All opposed? All abstained? And Tim looks like he's stepped away, so I think the count's 11 with one, whatever the right language there is, Graham. Okay, let's tackle the item that was pulled out, which is the expense item.
Unfortunately, I think Tim is the one who pulled that, and so he might not be here to address why he did. So it might be better to sort of postpone that discussion until later in the meeting.
Okay, cool. Let's go ahead, Kirsten.
Yeah, I have a little bit on that now. There's one $700 that was put in on my thing as a mandatory, but it was discretionary. It was for the class I took in our ECA. So if we could get that changed over to discretionary, I'd appreciate it.
It looks like Tim is back now. So
Yeah, sorry, my neighbors got into labor and were taking care of their dogs in the last minute, so I had to. Anyway.
Wow.
I'll
Well,
be
everybody
TMI.
has excuses.
It's creative anyway. Sorry. So are you talking about the consent agenda item?
Yeah, we were just about to, you were the one who requested the item to be pulled out. So if you want to lead that discussion, Tim.
Sure. So I just noticed on one of them that there's a per diem was claimed for both travel to and from 2 different meetings. And I believe our policy is you only get to claim 1 day rather than 2. So, and I emailed that director, but I never heard back. So I don't want to approve it if it's against the policy.
Okay, so it sounds like there's 2 comments in there. Is number one is that correct? Is Tim's characterization of the policy correct? And then if so, we can ask that individual director to how do you want to do it? So let's start with the policy. Is that correct? Is that correct?
here comes the answer.
Okay.
So I believe he is. So for out-of-town in-state travel, the director shall be reimbursed for the actual mode of transportation subject to the limitation of 1 day per diem. So Tim is correct for in-state travel. If you travel up on a Sunday, attend a meeting on a Monday, travel back on a Tuesday, you only get 1 day per diem. You don't get the Sunday and the Tuesday.
Okay. So can we approve all the other expenses, but that one pending resubmission? That's the easiest way to do this.
And then I just want to say that I don't know the nature of the travel claim. That is for out of town, but in state. If it's out of town, out of state, I don't see that same limitation applying. So
Okay. Kirsten, did you have a comment, or is your hand up from before?
No, I'm done.
Oh,
Let me
wait,
get my hand
no,
down. Sorry.
Yep. Thank you. Joe, go ahead.
And if I could,
I believe that was, yeah, I'm pretty sure that was me, Tim. Sorry, I somehow missed
No,
your
it's
email.
not you.
It wasn't me? Oh, okay. Yeah, and I don't know, just a comment, maybe we need to discuss that sometime because it doesn't seem fair to be able to, if you have to go to Denver to only be able to claim 1 day of travel, but anyway, that's another time, so.
Okay.
and I'll clarify that as I kept reading. One per diem will be paid for 1 day of travel. So I think that is across the board, whether it's in state or out of state. So if you travel 1 day up and 1 day back, regardless of where you're going, you can only claim 1 day per diem.
Okay. Well, let's not get into the merits of that policy right now. but I share Joe's perspective that perhaps that's worth revisiting. Kirsten, go ahead.
My hand was lowered.
Okay. Okay, so we have other expenses in there. Is there a way we can we maybe perhaps do a motion, something to the effect of all items approved, all expenses approved, pending this one item, or all motions approved except that are in compliance?
I would suggest perhaps we approve all the per diem requests with the expectation that that one will be corrected. Or we approve all the expense reports in the consent agenda, and the one that is in question will be expected to be corrected.
Second.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Kohler, go ahead.
Yeah, could you give us a page that you're referring to, wherever that is, that expense report that you're talking about, please?
Sure, one second. That's a good point. Thank you, Colin. There's a lot of them in there. Hang on one second.
Yeah, there is.
It's a
And
page.
I'm on board.
It's page 24 and 94 in my PDF.
Okay, I have a 24-105. I wonder if that's the same one.
Oh yeah, sorry. They updated it over the weekend, I guess. So page 24. Yes, thank you.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay. So we have an open motion to manage as it stands. Is there any other comments on this item? Okay, all in favor of the motion, hold your hand up, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstained? Okay, thank you. The motion carries, and we'll deal with the rest of that, the fallout there. Let's see, Jessica, go ahead. The floor is yours for CEO and staff reports.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. I will go through our new dashboard as we presented it last week in combination with the operational plan. Okay, so here are key performance indicators. Now, we heard all of you in regard to the reliability section, so we are still working on that. It's actually more complicated than we realized, because Jerry actually has to go and manually and kind of look at the data and bifurcate it out, because we want to make sure that we are sending you the most accurate data for the month. So this is still outdated information. It is still X's, as you can see, and that's because of our averages. We are having more outages. It's heavier snow, as you saw over the last weekend. A lot of small outages around town. And again, it's because it's heavy snow and it's slapping the lines. It's not so much trees are down or equipment failures. Again, it's more because of the snow. So we are working with our IT department to develop better graphs on this to show accurate measurable data for the board to look at. When I get further in the dashboard, you'll see also we added a data point, because what we'd like to do is report more on the previous month and tell you, this is what happened in February. This is the average time of restoration. These were the outages. So, so we're there on this, and then next month, hopefully you'll see a different metrics with different graphs. Okay, all these remaining items are green checks except for cash reserves. And I will have Carl speak to that later in the dashboard when we get to his slide. Okay, I'll move on if I don't see any hands. Okay, this is be safe and excellent in all we do. So we have green checks for all of these. Even with all these storms, everybody's been safe. We've had no lost time incidents or accidents, so that's good news. In regards to regulatory compliance, as I mentioned before, every month we have new required training for our staff. We are using a lot of data analytics these days. Poor Drew, his team is working around the clock to really help us dig into the data at the company and find patterns and ways that we can improve. So we will continue to add those here. In regards to cyber, again, Drew's team is really working hard to make sure that any areas of vulnerability we have in our network, he's working to patch up. So that is all good news. And so he's constantly monitoring that with his team. This picture down here was, I was a moderator at a Women in Power event last month. This was the Northwest Public Power Association. They're the only ones pretty much in the US that are conducting women power events. And so next year when they do this, I would encourage also any of our board members to attend. They actually had a panel of female board members speak to the audience, and it was very well received and very informational. So I'll make sure I send out that information next year.
Jessica, I think you have a hand up.
Okay. I unfortunately can't see the hand. So, oh,
It's
Kirsten. Okay.
Hey, Jessica, a quick question for you. I see the hazardous material training. Talk for a second about what hazmat we have.
Oh yeah, we have a lot. So Jerry, do you want to speak to that? It's mostly out of your group.
We don't ever transport hazardous material. It's more the MSDS, material safety data sheets that we were educated on for any chemical that we have on the property. Proper labeling, what to look for, and where to find that information for all employees. So it's actually a very good training, very beneficial for everybody.
Okay, so it sounds like there's nothing on the trucks, but you were doing MSDS training for the stuff that we have in the warehouse and that we use in the
Correct.
building. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Okay. Keep the lights on. These are our targets. So again, we are taking through the wildfire mitigation plan, and that's so far we've, well, actually not so far, but in the month of February, we completed over 20 Raptor protections, replaced 16 reject poles, and trimmed vegetation along those circuits. So again, because we're doing a lot of this work, we're really seeing the benefits of this during our outages, which is less trees, limbs on our lines. So that is really good data to have. So on the target as of January, what we're going to do on that one is we're going to show you the running targets. So as of January to February, we've spent 5.5% of our capital project budget and completed 8% of the work. And so you're going to see some months where we're going to go faster than others. And that's obvious because of the snow. It's really hard to do some of the capital work we plan on. And we plan for that. So a lot of the work of this work actually starts to happen more aggressively when the snow is melted and we can get to certain areas that are hard to get to, or even get to undergrounding. So we also completed the West Side Underground Feeder Replacement Project. Those are the project numbers that you can reference back to the capital plan that you have. So again, on the target with the SAIDI, safety, and AC, those are going to change next month to be not as technical, but more of a, this is what we're reporting to the board. So in this case, we went ahead and put it in the paragraph. We had 27 major outages in February. So that's pretty big, impacted over 1,200 members. And Jerry, I believe that was the most amount of members out at one time. Is that correct?
That is actually a total, a running total of all the outages, of the major outages.
Okay, great. And then average restoration time is 69 minutes. So what we're going to come back to is we actually have done some data analytics to find out when our biggest outages are across the year. And what's remarkable, and I've mentioned this before, it's actually in the spring. It's not in the winter. And that's because of the high winds. So what we're going to try to do is look back in time over the last 10 years to determine what has been our average restoration time. And we know that we're getting better and better, especially because we've had numerous members write into us and say, what used to be days of outages, we're now having shorter outages. In fact, Tim brought that up from a neighbor at the last board meeting, so we appreciate that. So we're going to try to make sure we benchmark against us and see how we're doing month to month. So that's why that's taking a little bit more time, is because we're searching through a lot of past historical data. Kirsten, did you have a question on this one?
Yeah, quick one. How the heck did you get all of that wildfire mitigation stuff done during February when it was so bloody busy with storms and stuff? I'm so impressed.
I'm impressed too, Jerry. I mean, we've got an amazing group of crews. So
Yeah,
go ahead, Jerry.
These guys like to work, hands down.
Yeah. Okay. Source clean, low cost power. I'm getting a feedback. Okay, there we go. So this is our target, continue to make progress on LPEA's three-pronged power supply strategy. We are going to dive deep into this during executive session. So it's, and then also Matt will give an update in the public session on this. So I'll punt that for later. And then we're continuing to pursue local clean power. So this is in particular to the Sunnyside project. Unfortunately, the county continues to have staffing issues there. So unfortunately, their main county planning staff person that we were working with left. So it's created some delay, we think, but we are still working with the county to figure out next steps. We have an outline of the requirements for communication with the neighbors, because we want to get out ahead of that. But we're waiting to see, what the county requires of us, and then we'll make sure the board knows our communication strategy and when we're having public open session meetings. So we'll let everybody know in advance of that. Okay, any questions? Okay. Be a trusted community partner. So we are on track with all these targets. Again, Hillary and her team, and actually Drew, are doing a lot of work to improve how we talk to members, how they communicate with us. We've even worked to streamline and improve our communications around tree trimming, right-of-way clearing, and capital construction work. So what I really appreciate about Drew and Hillary's groups is that they're working closely with Jerry and Garrett to send out texts on information. So I'm sure all of you receive some of those texts occasionally. We've had a lot of good feedback from our community about thanking us for just getting that heads up. And then Hillary's team has also worked to create an email series for all new LPEA members, just to inform them what being a member of a co-op entails. So she really worked hard with the team to mirror that off of other very successful programs across the US, groups that are saying, okay, if you're a new member to this, we're going to start doing a leak campaign where we're sending a series of emails over time so that people don't get overwhelmed with just one email. Let's see, increased self-service and communication. We also launched a new webpage for the new director elections for the first time. So we're just trying to give folks more opportunity to apply for this in various different ways that work for them. And then create training and education programs for key stakeholders. Again, we're just trying to get out in the community, inform them of all the opportunities they have to do energy efficiency and convert to electric heat pumps. Again, electric grid, energy efficiency, and carbon reduction items. And then that picture down below is we did host a heat pump training. What we did find in our community is that a lot of our community members want to install heat pumps, but it's very hard to find a contractor to do it. So we're really trying to get out there and teach them and bring the experts to the table so that the contractors feel more comfortable about how to educate when they go to a house and the members asking for different options. We want our contractors to encourage and promote these electric heat pumps. Okay, Kohler, it looks like you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to re-emphasize on your increased self-service and communication. The feedback I'm getting as far as your texting, mostly with the outages. I know it's throughout your presentation here, but I think this page is kind of a bragging page, and that should be listed. I'm getting a lot of really positive comments. And for me personally, I was out of town when there was an outage and I found out that the house was out, and then there was a follow-up as far as it's being worked on, and then another follow-up saying you're back into power. And that's really, really powerful. I just, my hat's off to you. I really appreciate that. I think that's a great service, and our members are appreciating it as well. So thank you.
Thanks for the feedback, Kohler. Much appreciated. Okay, Rachel.
Yeah, I also thought some great work here on the comms. Love the new member intro because I know that was something that was highlighted a while ago. And I was curious for the contractor training, what feedback you were getting, or kind of the overall sense of it from contractors. Is there pushback? Are they excited? Do they find these things get installed and then there's all kinds of issues and they're not performing? Like, yeah, just curious if people on the ground had anything to share about them.
Yeah, good question. Hillary, that was John who gave the presentation. So what feedback were you hearing?
Yeah, so we had a great turnout. We had, 20 local contractors come, and the overwhelming feedback we got on the day was that they were just so happy that there was actually a hands-on training. A lot of them, receive invitations for webinars, but these type of, contractors, they need to touch and feel and see and try. So they were thrilled that we were doing it, and they were doing it locally, because there's also a lot of training like over in Denver and, larger metropolitan areas, but not here. So we are going to be doing a series of these. We're collaborating with FORCOR on another one coming up, I believe, in June. So yeah, most of the feedback was really good. The contractors know about all of the funds and the incentives and are getting more requests from members, and want to be able to provide this, but just haven't had the time or the opportunity. So we'll continue offering these moving forward.
Thanks, Hillary. Okay, Ted.
Thanks. I think this is the right place to add this comment. I went to the Durango Chamber of Commerce Durango Rocks Award, and the Roundup Foundation was one of the finalists for Nonprofit of the Year. So I just wanted to give kudos for that.
Thank you, Ted. Yeah, Hillary, I think that'll be in the next dashboard.
Yeah, we were hoping we were going to win. We had the press release all ready to go, but yeah, but home fund's great too.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. Appreciate that. Carrie, who's on Hillary's staff, has really done a fantastic job with the Roundup, and she's the one who submitted the application. So good job on her part. Okay, Tim.
Yeah, I was just curious about the nature of the training. Is it purely technical training, or is it how to market or sell or any of that kind of thing?
It was split into two parts. So John Kenny did the first part, which was basically letting them know about all of the federal incentives that were available to members, and then also what rebates we and Tri-State offer. And then after that portion, it went straight into the tech. This was really focused on contractors, not necessarily on marketing and sales.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Holly.
Thank you. When you click the one for Hillary for your one about the new 6 emails for new members, that had a stunning amount of information in it, and I really appreciate that very much so. I really like education, so thank you for your work with the Animas High School as well. So my last question is on the heat pump training. Were you able to engage any Archuleta County contractors?
I know they were invited. Let me double check with John on the actual attendee list, and I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Okay. There's no other questions. I will go to the next one. Okay, maintain strong financial health. So I'm going to have Carl take this one.
Thanks, Jessica. So once again, February was very similar to January. Cold temperatures, very strong sales. Dan had mentioned that sometimes February is kind of a tough month, just for margins, with it being shorter. That can pressure load factor because you've got less days. But due to the temperatures and so forth, we certainly did not see that in February. The only blemish there is once again cash is was below 12% on February 28th. As of the writing of this report on the 10th, and as of today, it is within the range for the goal. So that's why we put it as orange and not the red cross. Jessica and I consulted like the day before the end of the month. So do you want to borrow some money at 6% to hit this goal? And we agreed that if we think we're going to be in a position where for the entire month we're going to be under the range, then we need to go out and borrow. But if we know this is a very temporary position, which in this case it was for about a week, then we thought that was not the best use of LPEA resources. Everything else looks very strong indeed, especially driven by those margins. We'd expect, as things warm up, this will not be permanent for sure, but so far so good with 2023. Joe.
Yeah, Carl, when we've got a big margin like that, I think our sales were like $800,000 higher than budgeted.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work accounting wise? Does that just go forward? Does that go into a cash fund? What happens to that kind of windfall, I guess?
So what we will do, and I don't want to jump the gun. This will be up to you guys to decide, and Jessica I'm sure will talk to you. But if we do end the year with, once again, a very strong margin, then we will look at perhaps beefing up our fund to mitigate future rate increases from Tri-State.
Okay, but that money would be used as it's needed throughout the year, though, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, so Joe, that's a good question. So what happens is that we anticipate we get strong sales in these months, and then in the summer the sales go down. And so this just helps balance out the year. And so we expect these high margins. Some of these high margins are a little higher due to weather, but we actually don't know what's going to happen the rest of the year. Maybe it's going to be a very mild summer. People don't turn on their AC. And so we won't have good sales at all. And we could be going negative on margins for the month. This helps us kind of weather the storm for the year.
Yeah, I certainly saw it on my bill. So that's good. Thanks.
Any other questions there? Great. Back to you, Jessica. Thank you.
Okay. Prepare for the future. Okay, so develop partnerships to achieve the board's broadband goal. We continue to actively engage in local and regional discussions. Tim will give an update in executive session on part of this, so I won't spend too much time on this. So we are under the control 3,000 kilowatts of DER. Dan's team held a kickoff meeting to define the next steps of moving ahead in our pilot program. And now we have over 2,300 kilowatts of DER assets under control, which is an increase of 90 kilowatts over time. So that's really good information and movement on that. Let's see, under the grants, we're still waiting for an award, but we have applied officially for 4. We've already mentioned this before. We lost that one, but the one that we lost, we're still moving on a component of it. So not all is lost. And we were selected to move forward with Colorado Energy Office on wildfire mitigation grant. We're focusing on the Viper deployment, which is that picture. And I've mostly seen Vipers that are bigger, but Dan, is that correct? That metal in that picture is part of the Viper?
Yeah, it's on its way. The big Viper portion may not be in there on that picture quite yet. It's halfway installed.
But as we've mentioned the Vipers before, because it's a really fun word to use, it really helps us switch power around to really segregate certain lines. So if we have a power outage or a line that's down, we're able to use that technology to limit the outages in certain areas so that we can make sure that we get as many people on power as possible, but we're really segmenting the component that's broken or down or there's an issue to it. So that's really good news. And the wildfire mitigation grant also is helping us look at areas where we have overhead lines that have high outages and high wildfire potential so that we can underground those areas as well. We are identifying, honestly, dozens of grants. So just this 13 has already gone up because we have a lot of people contacting us because of our progressiveness and because of our location where a lot of the grant agencies are looking to rural communities like ours. And so we have a lot of people coming to us and asking for grants. Now we don't have a ton of staff for the capacity of it. So some of these we are having to turn down. So we did not apply for any earmarks, even though we got calls from our congressional offices, because we just don't have enough staff to write the applications. They could write the applications, but if we actually won on a lot of these, we want to have the opportunity or staffing ability to do those.
Jessica,
Hey,
you got a
Joe.
couple of hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, on the distributed energy resources. So does that mean we're doing two-way with people who have solar and batteries and vehicles? Is that what that refers to?
Good question, Dan.
Yeah, Joe, that's good question there. So we have a variety of different assets that we're going after. This is primarily electric vehicles, ETS heaters, and water heaters at this point. Once we can get vehicle to grid kind of things with EVs, that'll help as well. But yes, two-way communication to those assets. We have more assets than that deployed. And so as we bring that two-way communication on, then they go into this tally here, which is what that 90 kW addition was.
And then we're able to use that power to cut our peak.
That's what we're working on. We have the controllability. Now we're working on the interfaces to be able to talk to those items, and so we can press that single switch to be able to use them.
Okay. So I have an ETS heater. I've had it for 12 years or something. Am I automatically in there, or do I sign up, I guess?
Yeah. And so right now those are somewhat being controlled just through timing mechanisms. Once we have programs ready to roll out so we can provide a different incentive, it'd be looking slightly different, and we would engage you at that point.
Okay. And then a question on the wildfire mitigation. So we did get a grant from the Department of Energy. Is that true?
We've made it past phase 1. And so you apply with a real simple form, and they say, yes, this application has merits. You are selected to move forward. And so now we're getting into the detailed application where we spend a lot of time on it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Rachel.
Yeah, I had similar questions to Joe and was just curious if we could have and maybe it's already happened, but just a brief kind of snapshot of what the DER pilot program kind of goals and designs are, not today, but in the future when it fits in the schedule.
Yeah, good question. We can do that later. Yep. We can send an email too with more details on that. Okay, Sue.
And mine was along those same lines. I'd like to know what that pilot project is for 2023 and kind of what those next steps are so that we as the board have a better idea of what's going on with that.
Okay, we will send that. All right, Bob.
Yeah, just clarifying a little bit on I understand the Viper, is a cool word, helps you segment, I guess. But then the second phrase in that bullet is about the grant to go underground. And is that what Dan just referred to, that we're in the stages of that, or did we get a grant to put more line underground?
No, we did not get the grant. So what happens at Department of Energy is they send out kind of a request for proposals. We sent out the first request, and then they invite back a small group of people to come back. And so we are invited back for the second round. So we haven't gotten the grant, but this is great news because we are invited back to submit more information. So we're following along the process. They haven't said no.
but this is one where we feel like if we want it because we can execute it when we get it, not those others where there's too much and we
Yes,
kind of
I
say no
mean-
to on the front end. This is one we would be glad to get and execute.
Yeah, that's a great point of clarification. So the 4 grants that we've applied for, those are all things that we already have in some of our capital work plan. And so we would get funding to actually complete our capital work plan. So
Yeah,
this is
that's
part
great.
of that as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wonderful. And if we did get it, do you have a sense of how much underground that would allow us to do?
Dan, do you have that information?
Yeah, and so this is actually included in our work plan already, Bob. These are projects
Okay.
we're planning on doing. If we can get funding to do them, then this will be, less money we have to spend out of our own pocketbook.
Okay, so these are lines we've already tapped for. We want to put them there and now we could get some help. That's great. Thank you so much.
Good questions. Holly.
Great, thank you. It's nice to see so much interest in your DER projects. Dan, at the FAC meeting, you were talking about interconnection. Is that related to DER? Do I have the lingo correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's all interconnected, interconnection. And so the interconnection really deals more with how do we manage the workload that we currently have and what are the current requirements from the state and make sure we're compliant with those when we go out and interconnect rooftop solar.
Okay. Good stuff. So yeah, more to come on the pilot DER program that we'll send the board. Okay. And that is it. We want of our linemen and family at the parade. It's a really fun time. Okay.
Quick comment, Jessica, is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great picture. That's Trevor, right?
Yeah.
Do you guys send these around or post them? You have a lot of great pictures of people at work and it's nice to, I think they enjoy seeing them. Do they get to see them?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, we, I think Jenny has a spot where we post we have an internal website. So Jenny, I think, posts a lot of these pictures there, but I agree. It's really fun to see pictures of folks out there. Yeah. Okay. Okay, John, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Let's push on here. We are okay, so that was CEO and staff reports. We are doing good. Let's focus on the board action agendas now. And so let's go ahead and do committee on policy.
Got it.
Who's driving the bus? Ted?
Yeah, so let's see. My report's on page 55 of 105, and should be relatively quick here. Last month, we reviewed policies 120, 122, 126, and 128. Of those, all but 122 were recommended to be classified as reviewed, but no changes. Policy 122 had a minimal change, which was a title change, which we approved in the consent agenda. The bigger one is policy 215, the AMI opt-out program. So you should have all received an email and a memo from Graham early this, I think late last week actually is when it came out. And we need to go through the traditional process there where all board members have a comment period on that. So, open up that document, look it over, add comments. Kohler's already gotten in there and given us some of his classic Kohler catches, I call them, finding things that the really detailed stuff that's easy to miss, but he doesn't miss it. So I appreciate that. But yeah, this is the opportunity. We want to get all of those comments in by March 22nd so that we can compile those, review those in our March 27th meeting. And then our expectation would be, hopefully to be able to, take those comments if needed, make another revision and bring that to the board for approval in our April board meeting. So that's it for me, unless there are questions about that process or any of the other stuff in that report. All right, nice and easy. Thank you for your help. Thank you for everyone's help on that. That's it, John.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks. Ted, Sue, are you driving the bus on FAC?
I am, and my report is in the packet on page 61. Hopefully everybody had a chance to read it, but I think Carl will be going over most of this in his financial report here in a little bit. So unless there's questions specific to my report, I'll let Carl handle the rest of it in his report.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anything, so thank you.
Okay. Onward. Speaking of great words, the PURPA hearing. Ooh, I like that. PUSA.
All right, so back in November, we noticed we noticed March 1st as our deadline to receive public comments on 2 new PURPA standards that had been enacted by the federal government on PURPA 111D, and so we've compiled those. We have received 1 public comment from Jeff Berman, and that comment was circulated to the board and so I'll just say that as far as the hearing process, we do anticipate receiving some additional guidance from Colorado's congressional delegation based on some conversations that Jessica had with them back in the fall about whether or not some of this is even applicable to us. And so we'll have that kind of help guide the board in its ultimate decision, which isn't due until November of this year. But at this point, this concludes the public comment and hearing period. So the staff will prepare a summary and recommendation based on evidence received so far and the additional evidence we anticipate receiving from our congressional delegation, and we'll have something for the board to review before that November deadline. Joe?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could we go back to the financial report again? I mean, the FAC committee report.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sue.
Right. And I just had a question. Are we gonna the second to the last paragraph, Dan gave a brief introduction on a proposed rate tariff change. Is that something we'll be discussing in executive session, or because I know people will have a lot of questions on that.
Dan, are you planning on talking about that today as an introduction to the whole board?
No, this was just a introduction to the FAC. This will be something we carry along in a discussion in the FAC for a while to carry the discussion there before bringing anything to the board at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, Joe, it's probably 5 minutes. It was just to say, board, we're gonna bring a packet to the FAC at the next time. So there's actually not anything to update the board on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Rachel, go.
Yeah, thank you. Graham, I was just in your PURPA kind of statement there. Is this referencing the one kind of attached email that we have in the packet?
Yep, that is. So let me.
And that was. So we will get kind of a further synopsis and recommendation moving forward. But I just didn't. I confess it was really technical and I couldn't quite follow the dots. But then I read Dan's response, and it sounds like whatever the dots in that email were saying, it's basically here's an opportunity to increase interconnect opportunities, or yeah, I was thinking it's like the inverters and how they can help curb like the pulses and things. But you're saying really down here, this is a non-issue for us because we don't have an issue of not having enough solar on our grid. We kind of have an issue in the opposite direction, perhaps, from a facility standpoint, not from a policy or carbon perspective.
I would agree with that, Rachel.
Okay, thank you.
Holly, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Something that I had noticed, and I don't know if this is something we need to look at or not, but on page 105 of 105, the very last page, I was kind of stunned by the amount that our on-bill financing has grown. And so I started looking back over past board packets to, figure out when it really catapulted, because a year ago it was standing at about 189,000. This year in February, it was 482,000 in that range. And so it's grown like really large. And the thing that caught my attention that I just want to ask about is our policy doesn't define any limits on to how much can be loaned to an individual borrower, but further on the website in the application, it does. It says 15,000 for energy efficiency and 35,000 for solar installations. But it looks like to me in the February board packet that there was one that was $71,987, so way larger than what we have on our website. So I don't know if that's a problem or a challenge or anything we even need to look at, but it definitely kind of stepped out of the bounds of what we're saying on our website.
Would you like me to speak? Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
So all of that risk is taken by the lending bank, and they will make determinations on the creditworthiness of borrowers. So my understanding, and Hillary, if you know something different, is that the bank will lend more than what is on our website, but we've set kind of parameters on how we think these residential installations should work. I'm sure you know, Holly, that the jump was basically when solar became part of this process. It wasn't before. So yes, there will be occasions when there's amounts larger than that we have posted as one-off, but those are between the bank and the member.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? All right. So it is just a scooch before 10 a.m. Matt will not be able to join us early, so let's work around the attorney updates, executive session, and board actions, and for another 20 minutes, and then we will take a break at 10:20. Oh no, I'm sorry. We'll take a break at 10:30 as scheduled, so that Matt can join us at 10:40. Sound good? Okay. Great. So then we are doing great attorney. All right, let's get some reports going down at section 9. The attorney report. Do you have anything at this stage you can talk about?
Hang
on a second. Sue, you had a comment?
Just a question. Are we going to have Carl do his financial presentation now, or is that going to come later?
His financial presentation is now in the dashboard, as we indicated last time. So he already gave that slide. Yep.
Okay.
And then Sue, maybe what you're referencing to is some of the comments that we presented in the FAQ. We're gonna that part of the presentation is in executive session.
Okay,
So
perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Being gone last month, I wasn't aware of that change. So
sorry, that's true.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. And if we come out of executive session and you still have open matters, let's we can come back to them. Okay. Just remind me when we come out of executive session. Okay. Sorry, Graham, I didn't mean to cut you off there. The floor is yours.
No problem. I'll just submit my written attorney report and take any questions anybody has on it. And I think, Jessica, if we want to address this sort of along those lines of how we've integrated Carl's financial report into the dashboard, I think we're going to start integrating my attorney report into the dashboard as well, starting next month, right? So a lot of these bullet points that you see here will be sort of integrated into the dashboard to the extent that they're public information.
Correct. Yep.
Great. Cool. Okay, abs, any questions? Let's go to director reports. Let's start with Roundup Foundation.
Kirsten, I think
That's
this is
me.
you.
Yep.
Yeah, that is. So we had our retreat this last meeting. It was a good retreat. It was a time to reflect on where we've been and where we want to go. One of the things that we heard clearly was we need some more time in addition to the work of the foundation, which is collecting the grants or and then approving, collecting the applications and then approving them, that we need some time to also discuss processes within the foundation board, what our goals might be and such. So we're going to be adding some time, and I'm not sure that we agreed to what that was going to look like, whether we were going to have something added quarterly or what, but there's definitely is a sense that the board needs some processing time, not just the operating time. And then the report is in your package. Are there any questions about it? Joe?
Yeah, looking at the on the Roundup grants and the first one, Riverview Church Steeple. When I was on the Roundup board, we had a fairly extensive discussion about contributing to religious organizations because we'd had several, and I don't know if anything was formal. Maybe Graham, you know something about this, but the board at the time agreed that that Roundup is probably not a good place to to be given grants to religious organizations for obvious reasons. So I'm just wondering what that is for, and has that been discussed by the current board at all?
Joe, that specific request was discussed in detail. That was not a unanimous decision on that, but what it came down to for the eyes on that was that it was for the steeple, it was not for the proselytizing. And in that community, they needed something to see and be seen because they have a lot of youth programs and such that happen there. And so they were trying to do it for that. So I know we did have a discussion, and Graham, I have the same question. Did Roundup ever change their policies or bylaws on it? I didn't see it, but I looked pretty quick.
My recollection of this, and I can look into it deeper if you guys want me to, but so my recollection is that Roundup is prohibited from discriminating against entities on a religious basis. So I think if it could be sort of dangerous road to go down to have a sort of blanket discriminatory policy where we say it becomes an argument on one side or the other. If you discriminate against all of them, you've sort of treated them all equally and therefore aren't discriminating against them. But all of the documents that I've reviewed contemplate the ability to donate to religious organizations so long as they're properly organized as a 501s whatever organization under tax code, right? We can't donate to entities that will jeopardize Roundup's tax status, but there's no specific religious prohibition.
And so, are all churches, religious organizations 501c3s? Do you know?
That Roundup requests that documentation. So if they are not that, then they wouldn't be able to support that with documentation, and their application would be denied.
And Kirsten, is this actually for a physical structure, a steeple? Or is that a program?
it's for a physical structure. And the request was for more than was what you see there. So this is just for the steeple part of it, as opposed to anything on the not the youth programs, but anything on the generic side of the church. Does that? I don't know how to
just an
say that
FYI,
more nicely.
One that I remember when I was on the board is I believe we had a request from the Catholic Church, a holy name on the south side, and it was for a physical structure. And our objection was, isn't this something that, you know, the archdiocese or the church should take care of by itself? So that's why we raised a concern, and that request had been rejected. So anyway, thank you.
Right. Yeah, and Joe, you know, there's similar discussions to that on anything that has a national or a state entity. So for instance, Boys and Girls Clubs, which also there's a national organization and there's also a state organization. So frequently the question comes up as, well, does it make sense or don't they get these kinds of resources from their sponsoring agency? So it's not just a religious thing on that. Graham, I think we should I would like to revisit this, or at least have you talk to the foundation board about it, just so that we're all clear about what we can or cannot do, as we had a fairly long discussion about this. Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, thanks. After that, after the steeplechase, I get to speak. First disclosure, I'm the chair of Local First. So I want to, thank you for even considering at the roundup a donation to them, or grant, I should say. And on page 67, in the itinerary, I just want to correct, it's not locals first, it's local first. So that's often confused, and it's my responsibility to try and correct if possible. So please note that. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Ted?
Thanks, Kirsten. I might be missing this in the packet, but usually we see what you did and didn't fund. Did you decide, or were you able to fully fund the I guess it's 5 different grants that show up in the agenda?
You know, Ted, I thought I put that in there, and I'm sorry if I didn't double check my work. So let me look if it's not in there, and if you're looking at it right now, it's not in there. So I will resend that to the board, and my apologies.
Page 64.
I think that's on page 64.
Oh, thanks. Got it. My apologies.
Okay, great.
Well done, Kirsten.
Thanks, Ted. Oh, okay. Rachel, anything to add?
Nope. I went to the Durango Rocks Roundup kind of nomination ceremony and got to hang out with Carrie and Jillian and had a great time. So
that's great. That's great. All righty. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Okay, next up, Tri-State.
Okay, there is a board report in there and also my report. The board report covers most everything we did, but what I wanted to do is kind of let you know what we really emphasized on and spent most of our time during the March meeting. The first one was a financial error that was made. It was made in the third quarter of last year. It's a very large error. It was not caught by our financial department nor the auditors at that time, but at the end of the year, they did catch it. And fortunately, they caught it before we filed our 10K. So we went over that financial error, looked at how it happened, why it happened, and how we do what we need to do so that it doesn't happen again, and also to try to see if there's other areas in which that same kind of error could occur. So they're working on that. And tied into that, like I mentioned, was the 10K. So we did get a review of the 10K that was modified with this error in it before it was filed, and I believe it was filed last week. And then with that, we also went into pretty good depth about the audit. And the auditors were there. Again, they talked a lot about the financial error, but then the audit in general. And the other thing that we discussed was the rate design committee recommendation that was presented to the board. If you listen to Kirsten's reports, you got the gist of most everything we talked about. It was in executive session, so I can't share a lot of it. There's a lot of questions. So it's not a done deal. I think there's room for movement. And I can also tell you that Chairman Raybon has not broken apart that committee. He's kept it together because he thinks there's going to be some need to bring them back together. So he hasn't disbanded it at this point in time. Also last month, Tim, you asked me about in the board report last month about rate neutrality. I did get an answer on that, but I failed to pass it forward to the board, and I will do that today, probably at the end of this meeting, or maybe when you guys are in the executive session, I'll pass that on. Also with the rate design committee, now is the time where minority reports and comments come in. There's a 90-day period there. I know that United did ask if they could file it the day before, if that's allowed, before the June meeting, and that is allowed. I would hope that LPEA and others file it sooner than later, because if it's a day before the board meeting, the board's not going to get a chance to look at it. And I do think that's important so that we have some tools to kind of work for what we want to do and see what the comments are of the members. So, you know, I don't know what your time schedule is as far as the minority report, but for me anyway, the sooner the better. And and there's also another thing we went over was the strategic plan. I did add the strategic plan to our drive. I added it yesterday, so it wasn't there last week. I can't really talk too much about it. It's a very long, pretty in-depth plan, and I haven't really looked at that as compared to the changes we made from the original one, but I will, and if there's questions, maybe next month they can come up. So with that, I'm open for questions, and Joe, it looks like you have a question.
Yeah, going back to this accounting error, I was just looking at Dwayne's note here. Two questions. How much can you say how much that error was? That like tens of millions or low millions or any?
Let me just ask, Carl, was that in executive session? I'm not too sure I can mention or not. I can tell you what it is, but I'm not too sure.
Well, I heard it, Cola, and I'm not allowed in executive session, so I don't believe so.
Okay, so what it was an error that what they did is they did an entry and they put in a negative instead of a positive, and that negative was a $5 million entry. And so when it was corrected, then it actually makes a difference of 10 million, the 5 million to get it back to neutral, and then the 5 that should have been a plus. So in reality, it was a $10 million mistake that will affect the deferred revenue. And I think that's the biggest part where it affects it.
Okay. And so this idea that with no bottom line impact, those are Dwayne's words. I mean, you can't have something like this without some sort of a bottom line impact, correct? I mean, $10 million, it just like, it's not nothing out there.
I think I'd ask a little help from Carl on that to kind of help me out as far as that bottom line part. If you wouldn't mind, Carl, I don't know if you have the answer for that.
Hey, Carl, just to jump into, we are actually going to cover that in more detail in the executive session, if that helps. So we do have some graphs to show on that point. But if Carl wants to answer in public session.
That was exactly what I was going to say, Jessica. I think it's kind of tricky ground. It's probably best if we leave it where we have it in that presentation.
Okay. Okay, I'll be looking for an answer. Thank you.
Yeah. Tim?
Thank you, Kohler. As usual, you're always provided great information to us. This is minor, but on page, I think it's 64 under the, might be a different page actually. External Affairs Committee report, there's a link to the Google Drive, but it doesn't work. So I did get into the Google Drive and looked, but I'm not sure if I'm looking at this, the right report. It didn't work for me anyway. Let's see.
So it's the one at the
35.
very bottom of the report that didn't work? Sorry.
It's actually page 75, not 64. I'm looking at an older. They updated.
Right, and that's, so the link at the very bottom, right above my name, is the one that's not working?
No, the one under bullet point 4, Reg Rudolph's.
Okay.
report. So,
All right, let me get that link. I can email that link to you really easily, and you can take a look at that. And
perfect. That's great.
it's in the drive. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thanks.
Rachel?
Yeah, I was just curious, and maybe this comes later too, but the tri-state filing on the make whole, they filed with FERC on some sort of condition so that if someone submitted a buyout, an intent to terminate contract, but then didn't follow through, there's some sort of, they don't get left hanging in the wind. Do we have any further update on what actually that was and where that's at in the process?
Yes,
process?
Rachel, that's actually part of the executive session. We have a whole slide on that, if we can punt that one.
But it is also public knowledge, so just in case we need to, and we are in public session, so it is.
It's not actually for how we're going to talk about it is strategy. So we are not able to talk about it here.
But her specific
maybe I can
question
just give a little
of
background.
what was filed at FERC.
I
is
see,
public.
Kirsten. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry.
Thanks, Colin.
All right. I can give a little background, and Graham, you can stop me if I'm stepping over the line, but the way the policy is now on the CTP, if you give your notice, such as what United did, if they get up to the day before they're going to exit and they decide not to, there's nothing to prevent that from happening. But that's a real disadvantage for Tri-State because you have a very large load there that they have to plan for in that 2-year period of the notice. And they either have to plan on how they're going to sell that load. And if they do plan that and they find some buyers and then United decides not to get out, then they have to make a plan of, okay, how do we now make up for that they've already sold? So it's something that Tri-State really can't live with. They can't if you're going to get out, what they want to say is, all right, then you have to get out. There's your date and you have to get out. There's not an option at the day before or any other time to say, okay, now we decided not to do it because it's something that we just can't do our resource planning or anything else. And that's kind of the background on it. I do believe I shared with you Dwayne's copy of that. If not, I can share it again and you can look at it. I don't know, Jessica, is that you think that's all right to cover that part?
Yeah, I just think that there's so many unknowns on the tariff still that we don't know because Tri-State is saying that it's going to be retroactive. United and others are saying it's not. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's retroactive. Tri-State can still take anyone to court outside of FERC for damages, as Claire mentioned.
And that's correct. And they are asking it for it to be retroactive with FERC. So you're right. Kirsten?
Yeah, so Rachel, specifically to your question of where is that, it has been filed with FERC and the FERC clock is ticking. As far as all that other stuff about retroactive stuff, I have no idea, but it is, that tariff has been filed with FERC.
Great. And then I think my biggest thing I couldn't glean from the information we have was that mechanism that they were proposing. Is it, because I know there was initially you had to put some sort of, maybe this was the partial contracts, a down payment or something to file. And I can't remember if that got approved or didn't get approved. And just, I just didn't understand like what they were proposing as a consequence, or that kind of make whole mechanism.
Yeah, Cola, do you mind if I give a quick summary on how that works?
I know I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
So, and Rachel, let me know if I'm answering your question. So, because I think this is what you're asking. So what happens is that if a co-op files to leave, it's called unconditional leaving. And why Tri-State filed this rate tariff is because at first, Tri-State had not given the rules of engagement around how you leave. And to Tri-State's point, they want an orderly process for how you leave, right? So rules of engagement. So when DME and Kit Carson left, Tri-State had put together a rate tariff, identifying how they could leave. And they weren't FERC jurisdictional, so they didn't have to take it to FERC. So the Tri-State board approved it, and they said, these are the rules around how you're leaving. If you don't leave within this time, you have to pay damages, all these different things, because it is really difficult that if Tri-State leaves this amount of load and they know they're going to lose it, they are going to have to figure out how to sell it. You know, they're going to sell it on the market. So let's say then United comes back in 2024, which is next year, and says, oh, by the way, we're not leaving for 400 megawatts. And Tri-State has to go out on the market, purchase that power, because there's an obligation to serve under the law. And so that entails additional costs that Tri-State has to pay. So that's why they are now putting these strict rules, sending them to FERC to say, if United does not leave by 2024, and it's a certain date, and I can't remember what month, then they are obligated to pay for the additional power. So the number that they have to pay is actually that the administrative law judge of FERC ruled last November, on the methodology for the CTP payment. That now goes to the FERC commission. That commission is now going to rule on that final methodology in July of this summer. And so either they are going to take the ALJ's decision and just pass that through, or they could make changes to the methodology. We're just not sure. But as it stands right now, it is Tri-State who gets to come up with the number that United has to pay based on that ALJ's initial decision. So United has come out with their methodology. It doesn't matter what they say their buyout number is. FERC defers to Tri-State. So right now, United is obligated to write a check in 2024 for the amount that Tri-State has interpreted of the ALJ's decision, which is still a very high number. So that's why some people are thinking, well, gosh, United is going to have they will have to write a check in 2024 for this very high number and have secured power arrangements for all their power, which is pretty difficult to do in that short amount of time. So that's, again, why FERC is issuing this tariff, is because they're trying to cover that risk. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think what I was looking for was what damages include, and what I heard you say, because I get it, right? You have to plan your power portfolio way in advance, et cetera, et cetera. And so basically, if they don't leave, it's paying for that any extra costs of power or blocks associated with it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and honestly, Rachel, we don't know the extent of what Tri-State would seek for damages, because I mean, it could be even staff time. It could be salaries of staff that had to work on it, right? I mean, it could be a whole host of damages that they're going to claim, attorneys' time. So it's not just the power component of it.
And it's a pretty big figure. It'd be a pretty big damage. So
That's correct.
I don't see any other questions. So John, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you. You're muted, John.
Yay, tech. Let's see. We are up for Tri-State Rate Design Committee. Kirsten, I think that is you.
Yes, thank you. So as Kohler mentioned, the rate design committee has not been dissolved, but we did finish our work to date in February. And I reported on that in February. So the board has it now. I don't have a written report because Kohler's going to be reporting at on the ongoing on that. I did send out folks the stuff. Kohler, I wasn't sure if you felt comfortable sending it out because you might have seen that in executive session. We saw it in open session. So it's out there. It's also filed under rate design committee. And unless anybody has any questions, I'd like to take this off of the agenda in the future, unless we get reunited or revamped or go back into session. There's some questions. Hi, Joe.
Actually, my question wasn't about the rate design committee. So I guess you can go to Holly for this one to come back to me.
Great, thank you. Kirsten, I was just curious why you singled out that one slide and that one question. Do you support the following rate design component? And that is, do not include direct assignment of state regulatory costs.
The reason that they actually sent that separately, and the reason why is when they first sent all of the other questions about that, they forgot to include that one question. So the state regulatory cost was actually, I think, the last item that was voted on as an individual. And if you notice, that's also what the Wyoming co-op, that's what their minority report was about, is not agreeing. They didn't feel that that was covered sufficiently, and they think they got a short shrift on the discussion of it. They didn't really discuss whether it should have been positive or negative. Answer your question, Holly? Super. Joe, is your question for somebody else? I'll drop off.
Yeah, probably for Dan and maybe Kohler. I'm just getting back to the tri-state report. And let me see, it's page 79. Tri-state reported reached a new wind penetration record on February 13th, reaching 659 megawatts. Dan, can you put that in perspective? Is that really good, or I mean, does that make a dent in how much power they're providing? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so Tri-State's total load, and this is a summer, I think their summertime peak load's closer to 3,000 megawatts. So that's a good percentage. That's close to over 20%. That was coming from wind. So that was probably peak production. And I don't know what the loads were at that time, since Tri-State summer peaking, that could have been offsetting a much larger percentage. But obviously it's higher than it's been before. So that was, probably attributed to good wind resources. And Kohler might be able to reference if they brought additional wind resources on recently, that would have added to that. Otherwise, it just would have been a good wind production month.
It
And
was just a good wind production. There was not additional stuff since the NIL was added.
And that was basically on that day, correct? 659 megawatts. That's just reflection of one day.
At one period of time, that's correct. Yes. And again, Joe, last month you asked me about the different things, and I sent you and the whole board that one presentation in our drive. And again, you can look at that in almost the same pages as I mentioned last month, and you can see the different wind facilities we have, and also their capacity and how well they performed. I can tell you that the one that you'll look at now is for January. All of the renewables are under budget, solar as well as wind.
And under budget meaning they're underperforming they're
underperforming what we had budgeted. That's correct.
Okay, great.
And
Thank
wind
you.
did better than, well, no, actually wind was off. I think overall it was off 20% over what the budget was.
No, wow. Okay, great. Thanks.
Rachel, did you have a question?
Yeah, it was just, I think Kohler mentioned something about you could file minority statements about the rate design, and I'm trying to remember where we've landed on that. Kirsten, and are you advising me file something, or are we on board with kind of what's going forward?
Rachel, we are filing something, and I'm the long stick on that. I have outlined it, and we're gonna be doing it step by step against Tri-State Board Policy 503, which is their how their rate design guidance. So we're going to be doing that, and that's on me, and I'll probably be working on it in the next couple of days. And my apologies. So Kohler, I'm with you. I don't want to. We're not going to wait till the day before, which I think is pretty rude. But we will have it out there before the next board meeting. And thank you for that bump.
Thank you.
I think besides just being rude, it also makes it so that your point isn't considered. People won't have time to look at it. So the sooner, I think and it also helps me working on other directors if we have something in front of us, a tool or a reason. So it's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Kohler, I would suggest that the reason for doing it the day before, maybe rude's not the right word, but it's not for the board that they're doing that. It's for FERC to make sure that that gets shown that they disagreed. So it's not for you anyway, Kohler. So what that's worth. And that's it for me, John. Thanks.
Yeah, perfect timing. Look at you posting up right on the not 10:30. Okay, appreciate that. Let's take a 10-minute break, and we will see you guys back at 10:40. Yes, thank you. Okay, just let's see, is Matt on yet? No. Nope. Jessica, is Matt coming?
Yes, I have texted him.
Okay. Glad I rushed everybody.
I mean, if we need to, Graham, we can probably give any public update, which there really isn't any public update on the case. And we can move to executive session because I'll be walking through the presentation. And then if we need to come back, if he has something for public session after executive session, then he can make that statement then if you'd like.
Okay, I think that works. So to be clear, Kirsten, go ahead. No, okay, so to be clear, the official statement is there is no update, and then we'll move to we'll need to move to go to executive session, and then we'll just sit in executive session until he shows up.
No, I can go ahead and start the presentation without him. He's reviewed all my slides. So I was actually planning on giving the presentation on him.
Okay. And then when he comes in to executive session, we'll hit the pause button and then have him give her his thing, or?
No, I think that I don't think we need him for anything unless he has a public session. I'm just saying, let's get through executive session. And then when we're done, we can, if he feels like he has a more substantial public update, we can leave to go back into public session when we're done with executive session. Is that clear as mud?
Yes,
Okay.
that is clear. So if I have it correct, then we need a motion to move into executive session. And
So moved.
thank you. Can we get a second?
Seconded.
John Lee, thank you. All in favor? And say aye. All opposed?
Aye.
All abstained. Everybody take a minute. Make sure you got your link up.
So
And just for the record, so Kohler should recuse himself from
Yes.
at least a portion of this, but as you'll all recall, we amended the agenda to add a broadband component. And so somebody's going to call Kohler on his telephone as opposed to text him because he was having texting issues.
Yep.
We'll get that taken care of.
That is the plan. So, okay, everybody good? We'll see you at the other side.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let us resume. We had just finished the Tri-State Rate Design Committee discussion before we went into executive session. There were no actions coming out of executive session and no updates from our outside counsel. So let's go ahead and move forward with the next item on the director reports with the fast track communication report.
Hey, John. So again, the reports in the board packet. I'll just mention that we did approve an operating and capital expense budgets at the last board meeting, and so we have a baseline for 2023 that we feel pretty good about, and that will help in our reporting of our actual against budget, which was a little off in 2022. We didn't have a clearly approved budget through 2022. We corrected that. It's also there's a group in the Southwest Colorado, which is directed by Region 9, that used to be Southwest Council of Governments, used to direct a broadband effort. That director resigned a while back, and Region 9 Economic Development Board took that over. And within that, they have organized regular meetings and updates amongst the various entities, from Cortez to Archuleta County, Pagosa, Zapata County, a lot of different entities, municipal entities, schools, the Southern Indian Tribe. And they met, as well as Region 10 has been working with us, and CDOT. So we're to try and put together an overall effort, if you will, coordinated effort to put a plan as to how grant dollars should be attracted from the federal and state level into Southwest Colorado to improve broadband. And they held a meeting up in Crested Butte recently, and I believe in the reporting that we got back from Kelly and some other people that are on that effort, was that we are poised. This is one of the more organized regions in Colorado to try and pull that together, and a lot of coordination around that. And I just point that kind of effort hopefully will result in our getting a fair share, or more, perhaps ideally more than our fair share. Otherwise, it's going to end up in the Front Range like it usually does. Dan, I think you participate. Dan Harms, I think you participate in some of these. Do you have anything you want to add, or any observation? Do you think I'm?
No, I think you're right on there, Tim. The back at the napkin calculations done based on these funds get allocated based on underserved and unserved areas across Colorado, and I've asked for the Colorado Broadband Office to provide us some stats of our area versus the state in total. And the way I look at it, you're right. I hope we get more than our fair share because of our higher ratio of an underserved population relative to the rest of the state. And then, I think these proposals that are going forth that show a collaborative effort amongst a wide variety of people really stands a good chance of being selected.
Excellent. Yeah, so those are just my two verbal updates. The report stands on its own. if anyone has questions. Kirsten, you have a question, I see?
Yeah, yes, sir. Kind of more of a statement. Archuleta County Broadband Office is having an update meeting this evening at 5:30. It's going to be at the Archuleta County. Sorry, it's going to be at the town hall. So if anybody can attend, that would be great. And I don't know what they're going to say. They say they have big news, but I don't know what it's going to be. So perhaps I have big news for you next time.
Excellent. Kohler, you had a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So I have two questions. The first one is, are you thinking now, or what's your thought about having the 3-person board that you have? Are you getting the agility that you wanted and being able to move forward and like you had thought you would? Is the first question. And go ahead.
Yeah, I feel that it's a more involved and much more responsive board to the issues and opportunities for Fast Track. And I think that I would also defer to Ted as the chair of that board to tell me if I'm off base or not.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tim. No, not off base at all. I think, you know, there's really probably nothing unexpected that I could say about that. You know, it was, in my opinion, a mandatory decision. It was a great way to go. The nimbleness is absolutely there. I think it's you know, in today's current environment, it's really necessary that we have that. You know, like the things that Tim's talking about and Dan's mentioning about, you know, the fast moving pace of the broadband environment. You know, the traditional model that I sat through for, you know, 6 or 7 years, and Tim a few less than that, really wasn't nimble enough to handle that. The flip side of it is, and Tim used a nice word, more involved. You know, the board is very involved. It's, you know, sort of on a daily, weekly basis, not a monthly basis. But I think, you know, all 3 board members are committed to that and working well together to, you know, to keep up with that. I don't see it as an exceptionally long-term model. You know, the hope, I mean, first of all, you know, the board members will burn out if we keep doing it the same way. So, you know, the goal is to, you know, work through whatever the current environment is with this nimble, smaller model, and then make some decisions, you know, about what is the right long-term sort of board structure for Fast Track. But that's the long-winded answer, Kohler, to say that, you know, it is doing what it was expected to do when we proposed it.
Okay, thank you. That's what I want, kind of an update. And my second question, and maybe Carl needs to jump in on this. When I'm looking at our statement of operations for LPEA, and I'm looking at page 97 of 105, it has for income from the equity investment of nothing for year to date as well as the month. And I was wondering, does that tie back to you're not having a CFO or whatever that thing was a couple of months ago, Tim?
No, I think it's more the financial results are weighed down by the market performance of the investments that Tri-State has. Operating margin of Fast Track has been pretty solid, but what gets reported back to Carl, and he can correct me if I'm wrong on this, and to our LPEA statement, is really the net margin, and that's after investment performance. We have not lost capital in that investment performance, but you take this paper loss or paper gain kind of on a monthly basis, and the market hasn't been that good to us in that respect. So I think that it's more of that reflection than anything. And it is also a case that I think because we changed the schedule a bit of our board meetings vis-a-vis the LPEA, the reporting for Fast Track's financials into the LPA may be a little bit delayed, so we may not be showing January's performance. It's only through the end of 2022 at this point on the LPA statement.
Yeah, that's all I saw was the 2022. So I was wondering on that. So
Right.
That's helpful.
You haven't received, Carl, you haven't received January.
That's correct, Tim. You're spot on. We're just a couple of months behind, but I think that's audit related, and we'll get caught up.
Yes, audit is ongoing, and I believe we should see, we should see a completed draft anyway, I think by the end of this month.
Yes.
Okay, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kohler. Anyone else? Any other questions? Comments are welcome. All right, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving down the line. CREA.
Great, thank you. So CREA did hold its annual meeting. That was in the conjunction. The first day was actually a manager's board meeting on Wednesday, the 22nd. It was fascinating because it started with a tour of Tri-State's command center. So we were able to take a look at how they monitor their entire system and deal with things that come up. And that was fascinating. We also went through the department that does day ahead and hourly markets. So we learned some stuff there. So I was grateful for that opportunity. Then the board meeting started, and it went through a bunch of the legislation that CREA has been following. All of that is written up in my board report in the packet. I do send the updates Mondays when I receive them to you all. So if you have any specific questions regarding that, let me know. One thing I did want to point out is they're working to establish a wildfire resiliency code board. And, John Lee, of course, I thought of you because there's also going to be a couple of board seats for not-for-profit utilities, specifically REA and a muni seat. So, I think you'd have great great things to offer there if you're interested. Let's see here. The end of that meeting was the topic before the board was the energy transition, pedal to the metal or pump the brakes. And that was an interesting discussion. It has the same ideological split right down the middle, pretty much of that board. Joe did an excellent job writing up the rest of the CREA annual meeting. So I went through it. I really didn't have a whole lot of points to add to his report. So that is a big chunk of the annual meeting. One thing I also wanted to point out, we did take 965 electric vehicle strategy and policy considerations. And that was a pretty good class. And it did indicate, LPEA is pretty well ahead of the curve on a lot of that. And so kudos to staff. In the fall at the Energy Innovation Summit, there's going to be 979 being a consumer-centric utility is going to be offered. So anybody have any other specific questions for me, please? Joe.
Yeah, I just like to say that about the electric vehicle presentation, just a lot of things got brought up that, I know staff's working on, but that I really didn't think about or know about. And so I know we're going to get more of that from staff later. Thing that really jumped out at me was the idea that, gosh, we're going to have to do a lot of outreach to folks about when to charge and how to charge and all that kind of stuff. I'd never even thought of that component. So this whole transition is going to be a pretty big deal. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joe. And I think that's really one of the reasons why I think Cooperative Principle 5 is one of my most favorites, because it's training, education, information for all. And that's not only for board members, but it's also for the public, right? They need to know what things we're facing, especially with like the peak demand and stuff like that, how can they adjust their behaviors if they're not aware of it in the first place? So I think it's a really important thing going forward. Thank you for that. Tim?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that the joint report, and maybe Joe wrote it, it had all three of your names on it. I thought that was really good and it was really helpful. So I just want to compliment you all on that. Going to the same conference, cooperating on providing a report back to the board is helpful. I don't know if you can shed any light on this or not, but the training that you mentioned around EVs, there's a statement in there that care needs to be taken not to subsidize the EV owners. And I was just curious, can you give context on that? I mean, in a sense, we are doing that.
I don't have any specific thing that comes to mind right out of the gate. I was going to go look at the report and read that. Joe, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Well, I mean, that was just in the notebook, and that's the stance by the NRECA instructor was that, and I don't think it applies to us, but that was his point, and he was talking about, working in a lot of other areas in the country that are much less open to, alternative energy, although there's a lot of EV stuff going on everywhere. But, his point was basically that, members can't see that we're providing subsidies in any way to electric vehicle owners. He didn't say, how that would have been done or anything. So it was just kind of a question that he raised for us. I don't know if Dan wants to comment on that, or I know you weren't at it, Dan, but
no, I mean, EVs were a hot topic in the conference I was at with Tech Advantage as well, and lots of good discussions on it.
All right, thanks.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, well, I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you.
Okay,
Western United.
John,
Oh.
I'm sorry, I forgot to
Go ahead,
mention.
Joe. Go ahead.
Holly, forgot to mention that Holly and I got to go see Stomp, which is kind of a Broadway traveling thing over at the Denver Center. That was a lot of fun to do something besides go to meetings. So, and if you ever get a chance, so.
You're saying that guys dancing with brooms and is more fun than energy?
By that time of the day, it was,
okay.
Yes.
All right, Western United.
So John, I know that this is your bailiwick, but since I went to the annual meeting, I'll go ahead. Okay. So there was nothing at the annual meeting that you hadn't heard already from John Lee. The financials are in our shared directory. The highlights are on my page there. The big thing is supply chain, transformers. Anything that you think I need to add, John?
No, I just to share with the board that, last month I thought I was in attendance of it, and Kristen at the end of it, at the end of the meeting said, hey, last year as the board member, I didn't go to the annual meeting, and she was the elected representative. And so I investigated that, and yeah, it would have been a mistake for me to have been there. They were not planning on that. So I did ask them to change that for new members. If we have somebody other than Kirsten or I doing it in the future, we'll have a little bit better idea of who should attend which meetings. But the next one is in April, and it'll be after our April meeting. We'll report that in May.
Okay, thank you for that. That is the meeting. Yes? Fuller, go ahead.
Yeah, just one real quick question to Dan Harms. I know when we start talking about policy 215, that opt-out, we have to file a tariff. Will that tariff be a formulary tariff so we don't have to keep filing it? Or is it something we'd have to do every time there's a change?
So policy 215 itself, of course, is a policy, but there is a rate behind it that anybody on opt-out does join that. And as we dig into the rates now, those aren't going to be passed simultaneously. We're just addressing the policy right now. So we'll address the rate side of things probably when we do the rest of our rates coming up in 2024. And it could be formulaic type of thing at that point if that's where we decide to go, so we don't have to keep touching it.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, any last comments? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you guys so much for your help, and we'll
Thanks,
see you next
bye-bye.
month.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy
Bye.
snow shoveling.
Thank you.